Hey, Jamie, welcome to the program and thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks a lot, Mark, for the invite.
So Jamie, I've been following you for years. I always loved, I think got really ahead of the game back in 2016 with Social Selling Mastery. I thought it was a great book. We actually recommended that book to loads and loads of clients. Maybe to start off with, and it's got a great story in the book, Jamie, but tell me a little bit about your journey in professional sales, because I think it's an interesting one.
Yeah, I'll even start a little earlier than the book. So I never thought I was going to be in sales. I was a stockbroker at Bank of Montreal, Elizabeth Burns.
Nice.
Dot-com bubble happened, and I realized I didn't like that. I didn't really enjoy it, but I didn't realize I was also a seller when you're an investment advisor. So I moved to Australia, lived there for a couple of years, did my master's degree, and when I came back, the only company that would hire me was a 100% commission commercial real estate firm.
Wow.
So I started pounding the phones and talking to business owners and CFOs about their office leasing. Worked there for a couple of years, was quite successful at business development. It was very clear I had a knack for it. And one of my customers recruited me. I became the third employee of a SaaS software company in Toronto, Canada,
Okay.
$0 to $3 million ARR. And I thought I had all the answers to sales. And at the tender age of 30, I would start a sales consulting business or sales training business.
There you go.
First couple of years failed miserably
Uh-oh.
until I kind of backflipped into and self-discovered this concept called social selling. So I pioneered the term, pioneered the category, and grew a global sales training business, a multi-million-dollar sales training business that served 500 or 600 global brands, the Microsoft, Oracles, Intels of the world.
Yeah.
So that's my journey. I kind of happenstanced into sales.
By the way, I think, I'm sure you've read Dan Pink's To Sell is Human. Everybody happens to, he was on the show 2 weeks ago. Everybody happenstances into sales, or a good portion of those who don't think they're in sales spend about 39% of their days persuading other people to a point of view. Boy, were you on the money back in the day, in that time frame of coining the term social selling and then twigging onto that. I think you really hit something huge, obviously, based on where we are today. And you were on the front end of it. I really love the story in your book where, necessity is always the mother of invention. And you needed to figure out a way when you're running that consulting business to drive pipeline, to create some opportunities. And you had to do it quickly. And you really created that model. So that's sales for life. Those are amazing numbers, by the way, in terms of the numbers of companies you've worked with, mid and large enterprise, and the number of salespeople trained or certified, just shockingly large numbers. So tell us how we've evolved now to pipeline signals.
So over that journey, certified 250,000 sellers. And to become certified in our program, Social Selling Mastery and Spear Selling, the seller has to pick an account, plan it, engage it, and create a real life opportunity. And they build a video case study around it.
Right.
So you're sitting on mountains and terabytes of data as to how opportunities are being created. Started to notice two patterns. Pattern number one, the sellers were using triggers or compelling events as part of the selection and prioritization process. And inside those compelling events, a lot of them were based on our curriculum, watching people using LinkedIn, reverse engineering people leaving their customer base into their prospects. And that trigger was, highly valuable, but very time consuming for sellers. And at scale, what's happening is companies were missing all kinds of these opportunities amongst hundreds of thousands of customers. These job changes are flying everywhere. And from a global revenue operations standpoint, they were being missed. So ultimately we looked at it. And the second piece was, sellers were writing in support tickets all the time and saying, you've been teaching me to do this. Why can't you do it for me? So during COVID times, it gave my business partner, Amar, and I an opportunity to look within ourselves and said, let's create a managed service that will morph into a SaaS software called Pipeline Signals. And what we'll do is our customers will tell us every account in the world that they care about, customers and prospects. We will monitor them for relationship signals. So people leaving customers, competitors connecting, job changes, and we will route that intelligence into your CRM at the point of need so that the seller doesn't have to do anything other than pick up some sales intelligence. It's very prescriptive and they can focus on concentrating on the engagement side of sales rather than the research side. So we're buying back their time.
Well, so critical, right? It's different every year, but it's always in the same zone. Never seems that sellers are spending more than, a third of their day actually selling. And you see the numbers fluctuate a little bit up and a little bit down, but they're always we're trying to figure out how do we keep them more productive and actually spend that time selling. So let's keep playing on these trigger events. I think there's some of them that are very obvious to, most of the folks listening, and then there's some less obvious. So I think we're always looking for that trigger event where if we're selling technology, into a wealth management community, your old world of Nesbitt Burns, maybe if the managing director changes, we think, hey, a new leader's going to come in and make changes, or the VPIT changes. Hey, a new leader's going to come in and make changes. So those types of shifts seem kind of obvious and a trigger event for people to go after. Tell us a little more about the competitive intelligence, the competitive changes affecting an account.
Here's the easiest way to think about it. And this is a great way for you to protect your core customer and or think about net new customers. Human capital migration, follow the people.
Mm-hmm.
People are the ones that set priorities in a business. Companies don't set priorities. It's a series of people that make decisions as a co-op or a collaborative group or buying committee internally that choose what are our priorities, our rocks for the quarter, so to speak. So if you believe that inherently, you recognize that when somebody goes into a business, their past experiences bring forth people, process, technology.
Mm-hmm.
Or when people are in a business, not in a buying capacity, but then they get promoted to, they then take ideas that they've been sitting on and they bring those to the
Sure
service.
they do. Yeah.
And, or you've been working with a key stakeholder and, unfortunately you might be single threaded in the account. You've developed this strong relationship and he or she ups and leaves. Now, whatever projects they were working on just became a whole lot less valuable to the company because the priority walked out the door.
Right.
If you believe in that human capital migration, you have asymmetrical competitive advantages as in past customers going in. That's your advantage. But your competitors also have asymmetrical competitive advantages, meaning the people that join or circulate around these businesses, they could be interconnected to your competitors in multiple ways. They could have been previously employed at that competitor.
Yes.
They could have skills or certifications or past projects launched with your competitor. And I always often tell this story. At Sales for Life, we at that time were using Salesforce and our marketing automation platform at the time. I can't even remember what it was. Short, we hired a new CMO within 90 days. And I vowed I would never leave Salesforce. It's the only CRM I'd ever used. Within 90 days, we ripped it out and HubSpot was injected into the business.
Wow.
The sales and marketing side. Why? Decision maker came in, brought previous experiences with him, changed the people, process, technology. We were a HubSpot shop.
Right.
This happens all the time in businesses. So competitive intelligence helps you prevent the risks in your customer accounts, protect the core, but as well, it can help you avoid. I'll tell you another story. I was speaking at a SKO with a customer and we were doing a workshop, really much thinking about signals, sales intelligence and so forth. And the goal was, it was a team-based workshop, account planning. So cohorts of tables, pick an account, plan it, develop an engagement strategy. One of the tables, there was a lady that started to cry at the table.
Wow.
What's going on? And it's because I pulled her aside. She said, listen, you just showed me how to reverse engineer key stakeholders on LinkedIn, looking for both, past customers going in, but competitors going in. I had been working the Harley Davidson account for 8 months and it's been stalled. And it took me only 5 minutes to realize that the chief operating officer of this company came from previously employed at our top competitor. Now I know when we were hitting a brick wall. I did a year. And now I'm not going to make plan because I put all my eggs in this basket. And so account selection and account prioritization is so critical. And there's this publicly available data to you that helps you understand human capital migration. Take advantage of it.
Well, what a great thought. By the way, the competitors going into an account is something people don't always think about. And they really don't think about, okay, where's that person been in their recent past or even 3, 4 years ago? And is that a major competitive account? So it's not just, hey, what happened in the last 90 days, but is someone been promoted where, 3, 4 years ago, they were working with a large bank who's also an Oracle shop instead of an SAP shop. And doing that kind of research, first of all, is not that hard. It's all publicly available. Secondly, really interesting. And then the third point, as I'm sure you shared with that lady, is it doesn't mean all is lost,
No,
but now we do, we got some insight here in terms of maybe a point of view that other individual is going to bring to the table. So I'll be well prepared when I'm having that conversation with Harley Davidson and that COO.
it helps with account deselection,
Mm,
deprioritization, and or another way to, so deselection, the key stakeholder, previously employed at our competitor, we're never winning this account.
right.
Deprioritization. Instead of me spending months on this, I might try to flank that key stakeholder. If I don't get anywhere, I'll move on to the next account.
Mhm.
And then kind of removing the competitor side. But this is why people leaving accounts is also important to monitor. How many times you've been working an account and you ran up against a gatekeeper, a blocker, somebody that just is not willing to change? And what did you do? Your team then disqualified that account, put it in the CRM as, we're never getting this thing.
Mhm.
Average North American employee right now isn't even keeping their job 2 years.
I know.
IT stakeholder ups and leaves, and it's like they hit the refresh button in that business.
Boy, there's a great thing to bring up. We've referenced on this podcast before, the great resignation that everybody is seeing. It's just unbelievable. So again, here's where your timing comes into play. This thing about the trigger events and then, transitions of human capital. Never before in the history of time, there's been this transition of human capital at this pace or at this scale.
Your CRM depletes on average 3% a month.
Wow.
So take that over the course of a year, take that over a course of 2 years. You have a complete recycling of your CRM.
Right.
And one of our customers, we've started now measuring this, and it's starting to pan out across our customer base. 85% of every signal that we're placing in their CRM is net new to their CRM. Why? These are people all brand new to their jobs for various reasons. Either you have an existing customer relationship or you have a pending relationship. It's just a new job change,
Mhm.
not in your CRM. And because the tools you've been using, LinkedIn is what's called a pull notifier. It requires the seller to go in and extract information in a pull-like motion.
Mhm.
Zoom Info is one of the most popular databases in the world, one of the greatest databases in the world.
Yeah.
Also is a pull notifier. It requires the seller to look up an account, find contacts, pull them into the CRM, but it's also not alerting you of the migration of jobs and the interconnectivity between customers. And that's what we're solving.
And so when you're solving it as a managed service, you're pushing it straight into my sales loft or my outreach or my HubSpot.
As tasks.
So as a task. So I'm coming in and I go, oh, see,
Correct.
Peter Jones has moved from here to here. Andy Paul has gone from here to here. Maybe it's a good time to reach out to Andy.
Yeah, I've got a Yeti. I'm drinking out of a Yeti here. So Yeti is your account, and in there is a contact. That
Yep.
new contact is Mark. He's the new chief revenue officer over at Yeti. And there is now a task with a giant prescription or descriptor. And that descriptor says, Mark used to work at our customer Igloo Cooler.
Yes.
And now left Igloo Cooler and is now over at Yeti. Here are the next 4 steps you should take. Number 1, talk to the CSM internally that did the Igloo Cooler deal and learn about how you can bring forward the insights. Number 2, socially surround Mark, connect with him on LinkedIn, share some ideas with him. Number 3, Here's a sales play you can use to engage them via email. So we're creating the prescription for the seller.
And is that an automated process? You call it a managed service today,
An automated
Jamie?
process.
Yeah.
So we are middleware.
Okay.
From a seller's perspective, we're invisible. We don't exist.
Right.
The only thing they get is tasks in their CRM. And every month we do feedback loops with our sellers and our customers and their sellers.
Yeah.
That's their knowledge that there is a mechanical Turk behind the scenes, the Wizard of Oz helping them. That's us. And we refine their total addressable market. We refine their ICP on every monthly call, but otherwise a complete automated system that we don't exist.
And so down the road, when you start to think of this, by the way, when I'm doing this, so I'm on the front end, I'm trying to kick in new doors. I've got these human capital, signals that I want to be tracking. I've also got intent signals that I want to be tracking from Zoom, from Sixth Sense, whatever platform you're using.
Yeah.
You can imagine this time I've got some AI analysis of what's taking place, perhaps with the company, that says this company might be in a position where they'd benefit from what we do. You can imagine this day where you're coming in as a seller, sitting down, and everything's beautifully laid out with you, including the AI picking the sales play for you.
So you're now talking about the future that I see. I've had this conversation with Howard Brown, CEO of Revenue.io.
Oh, right.
Here's what I believe. And there's a diagram on the Pipeline Signals website. I want you to picture an account being Yeti. We'll keep bringing back to the
Sure. Yeah.
Yeti. There is sales intelligence happening to and around that account. The three major categories that I know of right now is buying intent. Like, we're not involved in buying intent, but there's billions of dollars of venture capital that have flown into that space.
Yeah.
So that's helping you understand who's Googling keywords, who's downloading assets. Those are people raising their hands. That is a piece to a puzzle, a story. Number two is called product usage. So imagine knowing every tool, widget, boobob, and software that a company uses, and then you can align your prospecting towards accounts that have great integrators and connectors to what you do, have complementary software.
Yep.
That's a category in its own, and that's an emerging market. Number three is something that we're evangelizing called relationships. And around relationships, they come in asymmetrical advantages for you, your customers, asymmetrical advantages for your competitors, and then pending relationships. So, I've never forged it yet, but there's a job change in or out. All of them are just pieces to a puzzle. They are pieces to a story. There is no one signal greater than the other. They're just feeding you intelligence to make informed decisions so that you, the seller, can interpret account selection, account prioritization.
Boy, very, very powerful. And that product usage you were talking about is really just technographic data, right?
Yeah, there's software like builtwith.com or G2 Crowd. These are tools that are begun to emerge that are helping, especially in the technology space, help you understand what widgets and boobobs do people use. The first time I ever saw it, we've had Microsoft as a customer for 4 or 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And and every single Azure seller at Microsoft has a dashboard, and it has what they call workload consumption or product usage of every Azure user in the world. It can tell you if they're using more Azure, less Azure, the right way, the wrong way. They call up their customers and they can have a contextual conversation about, hey, I notice you're using it storage this way. There's a better way to do it. Or I notice your consumption is moving, in the wrong direction. How do we help that? That's an internal view from Microsoft's perspective. Now imagine as an outsider, I, as an example, like to sell to people who understand the value of LinkedIn. What if I could acquire the list of everyone that uses LinkedIn? Target them.
Well, it's so powerful when you think of this, because we're on this thing right now, Jamie, with this common sense revolution in sales. I'm shocked with this unbelievable investment in the tech stack supporting professional salespeople and thought leaders like you, and then Tony Hughes and Justin Michael with Tech Powered Sales, and so many others doing these amazing things. And I can't believe that, the whole business discipline generally is still having a tough time from a performance perspective. And in fact, some metrics, I'm not totally on this bandwagon, but some metrics indicate we're doing worse. I think there's a little context for some of these, but so I think we're always on this common sense revolution that says, what do I want as a seller? Whether I'm starting a cycle or moving through or ending, starting a cycle, I want to be able to identify the right conversation with the right person at the right time. And it seems to me that the work you're doing only helps with that in terms of pipeline signals.
Well, we'll talk about the timepiece just for a second. So there is a touted statistic that is yet to be verified, but let's face it, I've been using it and it seems to work. But what has been told to me multiple times. In the first 100 days in the job, for any of your listeners who are new key stakeholders in a business, the
Hmm.
first 100 days in the job, you as a key stakeholder will either physically deploy or have mentally deployed up to 70% of your remitted budget for the year. Why? You come in, you figure out where the washrooms are, you meet your teammates, and then you realize you're on a clock, and that's a 1/4 clock.
Yeah.
And you have to have made impact. You can't sit on your thumbs for bunch of months. What is the impact you're going to make in people, process, technology changes to move the business forward? And that's why it's so critical when somebody comes in new. Yes, we hear this from our customers that the sellers will say, well, I've been reaching out, and they say, I'm so new, I don't know what to do yet. All that you've done is planted the seeds of inception.
Hmm.
Boomerang back in 30 days, and they're going to be in a power position to start, and more valuable, by the way, they're open to change.
Yeah.
What people, process, technology changes do I need to make?
Well, you talked about your CMO. One of the things we do with our consulting arm is we end up acting as an interim CRO. We'll come in, we'll do it's all that, the 100-day program. And in one example with a client I'm working with now, acting as the interim CRO, we're tripling the size of their account executive team. We're building a sales development team for them that they didn't have before. And we're building out that entire tech stack to support the sales development team. So you talk about rolling out the budget. Why? You have to make change. You're not going to get somebody significant as a leader to come in and manage and maintain typically.
No.
So it's so true. The other thing I think that people underestimate, this is where I'm on the conversation, is if I've switched industries, maybe I had depth in technology and now I've gone into the wealth management industry for some reason. As a new leader, I don't understand the industry, and I may not be wanting to pull everything I know from my existing team all the time to show my ignorance, frankly. So I think this is with these trigger events in the human capital, there's this opportunity. If you're an expert in your industry and a senior executive comes from outside into one of your clients or prospects, reaching out just to share what's happening in the industry. What else are we? Because they're looking to glean information. Forget trying to pitch or sell my technology. Just help them. Show some value, show some insight, understand what they're trying to go through. I think that's highly, highly relevant. And until you've lived that world where you're going in trying to make that impression, the Michael Watkins, the first 90 days, perfect example of, you've got that 90-day window. Until you've lived that, you don't really understand how compelling it is that changes are move is afoot for sure. Changes are taking place for sure.
Absolutely.
Jamie, what else are you seeing out there in the industry today? I mean, when you talk about Sales for Life had trained 250,000 salespeople, and you've still got this energy and enthusiasm for sales. Like, in some cases you might be fatigued by the whole product, but just this energy and enthusiasm. What else do you see coming down the road?
So if I'm a prognosticator, which I have,
I think you might be, by the way.
I was going to say, I wouldn't make a AA baseball team in my percentages that I've seen, I'm 43 years old. So I've seen some revolutions or evolutions, sorry. When I jumped into consulting, it was the evolution of what they called sales 2.0. That was my first, as I started consulting, that
Yeah.
meant field sellers were coming inside sellers, and there was going to be now an inside sales motion. And then books like Predictable Revenue came out, and companies like Salesforce really scaled up BDRs and SDRs that fueled AEs and so forth. Then there was a social selling revolution, the
Was.
power of digital, modern digital, social media platforms and technologies that surround that ecosystem to fuel the conversation. I believe that as we're leaving hope, that we're leaving the COVID era, this is my belief that's happened. So in March of 2020, if you're a North American, in March in 2020, your world changed upside down. And as a sales leader, you took all your most expensive resources, your high-powered field AEs, and you brought them inside.
Mm-hmm.
For years, they became inside sellers, very expensive inside sellers. Now you're the CFO and president of a business. You've looked at your numbers. You may have been flat. You may have grown, but your cost of customer acquisition, your cost of goods sold just plummeted.
Right.
And so now you're completely fixated on a potential new go-to-market. I believe that there's going to be, you use the word, and I'm trying to steal from you. You kind of called it common sense revolution. I believe that for the last 20 years, the chief revenue officers were living a little high on the hog, and the way that they deployed capital, the only way that a chief revenue officer deployed capital was throwing massive amounts of headcount at problems. Oh, we have a territory, hire 50% of people will make plan, 50% of people won't, and we'll just solve the problem through headcount. So now I'm playing the entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, thinking about my P&L, and it's so hard to acquire talent right now. It's overpriced. It's, well, I guess I don't set the market, so it can't even call it overpriced. It's just way more expensive. Onboarding and training, and then people leave. So I need to spend way more time, money, and energy in increasing the yield per seller of the people that I have. And I've got to look at the functions that they do in their job and recognize that they're not all created equal. And this was the premise of Pipeline Signals. I believe that there's $5 an hour tasks and $500 an hour value creators. And a seller's job is to create you outcomes. But unfortunately, a huge part of their job requires details like administrivia and research. And so finding resources, partners, vendors, software that can hyper accelerate or alleviate the sellers of these burdens so that they can do more with less time, with less people. I believe that companies are not going to repeat their own mistakes and just start throwing zillions of dollars at headcount problems. They're going to really invest in sales enablement, revenue operations, creating more yield from the things they have. That's my super long-winded way of, I believe that COVID will change the financial evaluation of every human who is revenue producing in your business.
That's interesting. It's so interesting, Jamie, the way you position that, because I think it is a bit of this perfect storm that will cause this clarity. One, everybody did get landlocked, right? People like you and I are no longer on flights every single.
I don't keep you on $9,000 flights anymore.
I wasn't flying all over the place during COVID for sure. So now I'm in one spot. The second thing is the cost of sales talent has gone through the roof, and it's just shocking.
Actually, I'm trying to recruit for my companies, and it's unbelievable, actually.
The conversations are even shocking. It feels like a little bit of the .com. You and I are old enough to have lived through 2000. We're having conversation with someone, and the confidence or arrogance on the other side of the table when they're explaining a business you're thinking of, and you're thinking to yourself, this doesn't make any sense. Like, oh, we're going to get a valuation of X, and you're going, they actually have no revenue and they have no profitability. Like they have no EBITDA.
First 2 to 3 years in sales, I made $0 base salary. So, and to your point on the corporate valuations, I got lucky with Pipeline Signals. We raised a pre-seed round and we closed that round in January of 2022.
Right.
But I come from the professional services world, so I believe that I took a very conservative approach to my valuation. I wanted to be able to catch up to my valuation almost instantly. And we're going to do another raise, and I have that mindset. But these 100x multiples, and all that's all done. Like that just didn't make sense.
So you look at that. I feel, and by the way, I love salespeople. Like you, this has been my whole life. And I'm just always inspired by the folks we're training and the courage that it takes to do it at the beginning and all those kinds of things. But now you've got SDRs who've been working for a couple of years who absolutely think they're, the star NHL player at the trade deadline.
They're asking $80,000 and
Up, 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 and just casual. We, funny story with the companies, we coach some CEOs on how to interview salespeople, and you all hear these stories. But the folks who don't even show up for an interview, somebody took an interview from bed. Like again, not in pajamas, but clearly sitting on their bed, lying that, sitting up in their bed, taking an interview. And I can't get out of my mind because, I'm not super old school, but I was around when the economy didn't do well in the early 90s. And literally there was a hiring freeze on many companies who said, we're actually not growing headcount. Unless someone leaves, we can't hire anybody.
So this is that perfect story we're talking about. So we have a recession looming, and then will be a contraction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's this moment in time, it's a candidate's market, a flood of talent, but I do believe companies are, and it's going to take CROs to really change their mindset. You can solve problems beyond throwing human capital at the problem. You don't just have to throw bodies at the problems. There are all kinds of other investments that make the people you have wildly more successful. So, yeah, no, I
One time to be in our industry, by the way.
to interviews, like shocking, like coming dressed properly to an interview.
Oh, it's an amazing. By the way, power to them. There's times and cycles, and many of us have these benefits of, inflation and growth, and making investments that went through the roof, like real estate in certain markets, all those kind of good things. But it's a real unique time in professional selling. And I just would go back to, again, common sense revolution. As a seller today, I think there's two fundamental truths. I'm not going to sustain in this industry if I can't add value in a live conversation with a prospect, because I understand their business and their industry and their issues and their challenges. I think for less mature salespeople, that's the call to action. And I think for some more mature salespeople who perhaps have been doing things for a few years here, can have that conversation. I actually think they have to work on their productivity by increasing their level of technical acumen. And it's so much easier than they think, but it is scary to jump into these worlds if you haven't been there before.
I think and sellers are either new to the industry or experienced have to understand the economics required for that performance. And so let's think of it as you take your base salary, your benefits, your commission, your desk fees. Desk fees is the operational expenses of running have software and sit in the desk and insurance and everything. You need to be earning at least 5 times. So if you earn 5 times your total cost, now the cost of customer acquisition at an aggregate across the team is give or take 20% of the business.
Yeah.
And it's kind of in and around where you're going to need to be on the sales side, because you still have to add your marketing costs to make up your total cost of customer acquisition on a P&L. So long of the short is, if you're a seller and you're commanding, I want $80,000 base, and then my OTE is this. And I want you to sit back and think, okay, so if you added up everything, the cost of employment might be 2 or 250, $250,000 to employ you. If you're not generating me $1.25 million to 1.5 or beyond, there's a lot of people that say you need to make 7 times your desk fee.
Hmm.
I can't afford to keep you around, and I'll find less expensive resources to do so. So you can feel like you have the ability to ratchet it up, but at some point this is going to catch up to you, and you need to create that type of return for you to justify being around.
You know who it has caught up with? CROs,
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
right? So it's caught up with CROs because the tenure, as you aptly point out, the tenure on a CRO right now is insanely short. So they do get brought in, they do get the, great comp plan, maybe points, and their window to produce is so short with, pressure from the board, pressure from the sales team, pressure from customers, pressure from the executive team, that it's this short tenure of a couple of years. By the way, Jamie, great chatting with you today. So, just boy, what a pleasure. I got one more question, and then I want to throw it over to you because I'm sure lots of folks are going to want to get in touch with you. First of all, learn more about Sales for Life and social selling, because that business is still up, running, very successful. Of course, an ongoing concern, and then the new pipeline signals where we're getting these key, compelling events in human capital fed right into our CRM system. Let me ask you this question that I like to ask folks. What are you reading right now? What are your favorite books? What are your favorite sources for expertise on selling?
I'm selling. So this is going to be a challenge. Let me, for anyone listening, for years and years and years, I listened to sales books, but I've been now a CEO for 12 years, and I've come to recognize that I needed to scale up the side of the acumen that I didn't have being a professional CEO. So I got to be open and honest. So I listen to a rotational about 5 podcasts every week, and I listen to 1 book every week, 52 books. I'm an audio. I retain through audio. I listen to 52 books a year, and I've been doing this for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. But in the last couple of years, I don't think I've picked up a sales book because I'm learning about capital raising,
Nice.
selling a business, all the things that I need to do as a CEO. So I'm probably not your best resource, but I have an endless supply of entrepreneurship books.
Well, let's hear one of those.
Okay. So let's just pull up my audibles here. As I pull up audibles, let's think of one that's recent, just something that's a lot of fun to listen to. You know what's one that's great if you are a CEO or an aspiring CEO? There's a new one by the CEO of Snowflake. He was also the past CEO of ServiceNow. It's called Amp It Up. Great one. One that you could, as a seller, could be really valuable as a seller and for your own personal health and wellness and fitness. I'm a huge believer of work-life intersection.
Yeah,
If you're
great.
healthy,
Great.
serve you. Okay. So it's called Atomic Habits, and it's about doing little things. A couple of years ago, I started getting up every morning at 5 a.m. Every morning at 6:30, I do 20 to 30 minutes of stretching and yoga. They all started to compound with me physically. So that's another one that could help.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jamie, by the way. So Atomic Habits, it's on my bookshelf. As soon as I read it, we're going to get him on the podcast. So yeah, that had been recommended by somebody else. Love that idea of, you
Little
probably read,
micro changes.
yeah, you probably read, The Morning Miracle, really short book, but about the, your habits, particularly in the morning, how you get a great start to the day. And I'm in the same boat. I love,
Are you like I'm on 5 a.m. Monday to Friday? I never miss it.
well, I am. And it actually was triggered prior to starting, the business very quickly. I was really traveling a lot. Like, so I was, on the road 4 days a week, all of these kind of good things. And when I decided to stop that and start this business, I thought, I'm going to enjoy my environment at the start of every day. So I'm 5 a.m. also, but I like to spend the first hour. I'm a learner. So I like to spend the first hour reading. And as you can see with your book, I have to highlight things.
Oh, it's fun. I haven't bought a physical book and it's funny
I
because like,
just, I love it. I don't know what it is.
in your book. No, I don't even have a copy.
So I like to read, enjoy 2 cups of coffee, meditate, and then set my intention for the day.
Oh, that's great.
And it's just, you end up being happier. And for me, I can stay in the moment.
And I've grown to love my morning alone time. I'm up at least 2 hours before the rest of the family,
Yeah.
whereas my wife likes to stay up late. I'm in bed, but sleep by 9:30.
Mhm.
So she likes her nighttime. I like my couple hours of thinking time in the morning.
Larks and owls.
Larks and
Dan,
owls, that's
Dan Pink from when? That was probably in your reading list as well.
Yes. Yes.
Hey, Jamie, how do the folks who've really enjoyed this podcast, how do they learn more about pipeline signals or sales for life?
Both pretty simple websites, pipelinesignals.com, sales for, which is FOR, life.com. We're continuously improving the websites to be the resources where when we do pitches, we pitch off of the website. When we do proposals and demos, you can buy online. So we're constantly trying to make the websites the place.
Yeah. Frictionless. I love it. Frictionless, right? So making it easy. Hey, thanks again, Jamie. It's just been such a pleasure chatting with you again. And can't wait to track. I think actually offline, we're going to have a conversation about pipeline signals. Folks listening today, first of all, thank you so much for joining for today's podcast. And you'll be able to see all the links to get in touch with Jamie as part of the show notes. But 2 things, if you enjoyed the podcast today, please like and subscribe to the podcast. And if you think there's ways we can improve this so you get value from the time invested, we really want to hear from you. So please send me an email and give us your suggestions. Mark Cox at inthefunnel.com. Mark Cox at inthefunnel.com. Jamie, we'll see you again. And thank you so much, sir, for joining us.
Thanks a lot. You take care.